You know, it's really hard to properly explain the absolutely rapid pace of innovation that was happening with first-person shooters in the 90s. The best way to really put this into context is that we went from Wolf 3D, which was mind-blowing at the time, to Quake 2 and later Unreal in the span of like 6 years. 6 years. 6 years is the same amount of time between something like Wolf, The New Order, and Doom Eternal, and while sure, Eternal is a real looker at times, it's not exactly a massive jump. In fact, in a lot of ways, I feel like the advancement in graphic tech has kind of stalled in some ways. Sure, there's always progress, and some new games in the AAA and even indie spaces are absolutely gorgeous. It just isn't as rapid as it used to be. You know, it's like new cars will have like new features and refinements, like electric motors or whatever, but you know, they're still just cars.
They're the same picture.
In the 90s, we went from Wolf 3D to large-scale 3D engines, which still find their DNA in like the majority of modern games at this point. And doing all of that in the span of like half a decade is like if Ford upgraded the Model A to like a 90s Taurus or something in the span of a couple of years. So I'm probably going to unlock a core memory here, but Soldier of Fortune was like the military LARPer's official toilet reading back in the day. Yeah, remember when we read magazines on the shitter instead of our depression rectangle? It's honestly kind of gross just thinking about how everyone's phone is probably at least covered in some part by their own excrement, but I digress. Soldier of Fortune was one of those mags you found in the rack next to Guns and Ammo or Outdoor Life back in the day, and it was the self-proclaimed Journal of Professional Adventurers. You know, a name like the Journal of Professional Adventurers is like a military LARPer's wet dream. I think it was legitimately targeted towards the PMC and mercenary crowd, but even the founder of the mag himself admitted that it was probably mostly read by the Walter Mitty crowd, which is a hilariously esoteric way of describing dudes that he probably just called various F words.
Bunch of slack-jawed faggots around here. This stuff will make you a goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus. Just like me.
So like anything steeped in popular culture, someone had the idea of taking a stab at a video game loosely based on the theme of Soldier of Fortune. I guess if you want to call it that. I mean, who doesn't like the power fantasy concept of being a soldier for hire? I actually find the whole PMC industry incredibly fascinating, such to the point that I'm deep into a book about it right now, because I'm actually kind of a boring dude and I like reading political science type shit. So, Raven stepped up to the plate. Yeah, that Raven. The one stuck in the modern COD gulags. There actually was a time when they put out absolute bangers, but you know, something happened after the last time they had an original idea that the overlords at Activision have been punishing them ever since. Raven brought in this absolute chad of a military consultant dude named John F. Mullins to make sure they got it right. And what do I mean by that? I mean like getting the absolute violence of this game correct. If you want to know how people die authentically, this is the type of guy you talk to. Sure, when you think of military type dudes, the usual tropes of meatheads with Born to Kill written on their helmets it's an easy one to fall back on, but the archetype of the nerdy looking dude who will clinically subdue and execute anyone in their way is by far and away the guy you have to worry about the most. It's always the dudes that look like middle-aged suburban dads that you know have the highest body counts. So, by far and away, the most fondly remembered part of this game was its outrageous violence. It was something we'd never seen before. Sure, with the advent of the Quake 2 engine, which this game is built on, we started to see damage modifiers for the textures of the enemies. So like if an enemy starts tanking a bunch of damage, they'll start to appear appropriately hurt. And of course, many games had jibbing where an overkill amount of damage reduced your enemy to a pile of guts and gore. Classic stuff. But Raven wanted to take this concept one step further. They wanted to make it so you literally deformed your enemies. Like, if you shot someone in the leg with a shotgun, you actually just removed that limb from their fucking body. While coupled with the appropriate reaction to this, mainly horrified screaming. Gnarly. This was actually mind-blowing stuff at the time. I mean, you had headshots that would carve little chunks out of their skull. If you shot someone in the stomach, their fucking intestines would be hanging out. And they would grab them as they fell down screaming during the duration of their probably agonizing death. Incredible stuff. Unsurprisingly, at the time, this stuff was seen as absolutely grotesque. Real-world, modern warfare settings where you're shooting other human beings in absolutely violent ways was still kind of a fresh idea at the time. Sure, you had to fight soldiers in Half-Life, and in the SWAT and Rainbow Six games had their niche fan bases, but we hadn't really even got to the World War II boom of first-person shooters yet. Like Call of Duty and Battlefield 1942 were still a couple of years out at this point. With Soldier of Fortune, I remember at the time there was these wives' tales of, you know, yeah, this game is banned in that country or whatever. But in retrospect, I think that might have just been one of those, you know, widespread rumors. You know, kind of like the Marilyn Manson thing. I don't know. The game was heavily censored in Germany, as far as I can tell, and here in Canada, the province of BC deemed the game to be classified as an adult movie, which is something that was usually reserved for pornography, so I'm not really sure what message they were trying to send there. BC was a heavily liberal place at the time, and it still kind of is, so I don't know. So, how does Soldier of Fortune hold up as a game these days? Well, it's definitely dated, and getting it to run at modern resolutions wasn't exactly a walk in the park, but that's PC gaming, baby. Console kids like to criticize the fact that PC gaming can be overly complicated sometimes, but really, me running a game from the year 2000 on my modern gaming rig is something that I will always love about it. Can you run that PS2 game on your PS5? Didn't think so. PC Gaming Wiki is always a godsend here when it comes to getting old games running. Whoever is running that site might as well be the Jesus Christ of retro gaming. The main things I was worried about here is widescreen support, because this comes from the 4.3 era. I also had to get rid of the mouse acceleration first thing here. Man alive, there is nothing I hate more than mouse acceleration baked into an FPS. Like, what were we even doing back then? Who could possibly like this? Some things are better left in the past. The normal difficulty was pretty easy, which is fine because it played well into emphasizing the fact that you're an absolute weapon of a man. The challenging mode was kind of tricky sometimes because the amount of damage you can tank dramatically falls off, and if you get caught out by a few enemies at once, you're probably gonna die. The amount of times you can save during a level is also limited by the difficulty, so that's fun. There's some interesting quirks here considering the era it came from. Most FPS games up to that point just allowed you to haul around a literal armory's worth of guns and ammo on your person. Soldier of Fortune was one of the first games to introduce the two main weapon only system. This game long predates Call of Duty or even Halo, so I wouldn't even be surprised if it was actually the first game to do it. I remember being kind of bummed out by this at first back in the day, but then you get your hands on the
Desert Eagle .50.
My good god, this thing makes your starting pistol look like a fucking Nerf gun in comparison. The pure satisfaction of just fucking deleting people's heads, it's just fantastic. Man, they don't make them like they used to. Gameplay of the game is classic FPS power fantasy type stuff. As I mentioned earlier, Raven had brought in John F. Mullins as a consultant here, and he was an instant self-insert. This guy was Captain Price before there even was Captain Price. Big fuck off mustache and all. Like, just look at the way this guy reloads the deagle. I think this is what the kids call big dick energy. The story is quick and concise. It's very much like something you'd read or watch in your standard 90s Tom Clancy novel or film. Some nukes have been stolen and you're the one-man army tasked with getting them back and saving the world. Classic stuff. Along with Iraq, you also end up in Japan, Siberia, New York, and even Africa. Truly the life of a professional adventurer. You even get to meet Saddam Hussein at one point, which dates this game even harder. What a time to be alive. So yeah, at the end of the day, Soldier of Fortune is fondly remembered mostly for its grotesque, over-the-top violence. It was well received by critics at the time, and anyone who played it back in the day will have that if you know, you know kind of response to it being brought up. Sure, it's pretty dated and a little janky, but that's all the rage with the kids these days and their newfangled boomer shooters, so it fits right in, right? It's a fine game though, and one you'll only need like 5 or 6 hours to get through. Also, it frequently goes on sale for like a couple bucks on GOG, so you just can't go wrong. I mean, once you step into that first level in the subway, and you start surgically removing body parts from gang members with your shotgun, you just get it. It's awesome. Thanks for watching.